This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Chuck Wagner, has been a familiar face and voice on Broadway and TV for some time. For over 5 years, he starred as the Beast in Disney's smash hit musical Beauty and the Beast. He originated the role of Rapunzel's prince and toured the United States as both Cinderella's prince and the wolf in Stephen Sondheim's enchanted classic Into the Woods. Also on Broadway, he appeared in the world's most popular musical as Javert in Les Miserables, Van Helsing in Dracula the Musical, and Athos in The Three Musketeers. His many regional appearances include Jean Valjean in Les Miserables, Fred and Petruchio in Kiss Me Kate, Lancelot in Camelot with Robert Goulet, no less, Billy Bigelow in Carousel, Curly in Oklahoma, and the captain of the SS American in Anything Goes. His one-man show, Living the Dream, has been performed across both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans aboard the Disney Cruise Line. For 4 years, Chuck was ringmaster of the greatest show on earth, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's Circus. We're certainly going to talk about that. Television audiences may remember him for starring as the computer-generated superhero in Automan. He created the dual roles of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the world premiere of Jekyll and Hyde the Musical at Houston's Alley Theater, subsequently touring internationally in the post-Broadway tour. I'm sure we're going to chat about this, too, a little bit, because I had something to do with that show. But Chuck was also the original voice of Jekyll and Hyde more years ago than I'm sure either of us care to mention, back when I was creating the show with Frank Wildhorn when we were all at USC together. For that reason and many more, it's a huge treat and a really great delight for me to talk to my dear friend Chuck Wagner today. Chuck, welcome to StoryBeat.
Thanks, Steve. So nice for you to call me, and I'm happy to participate. And
well,
I'm exhausted now just listening to all that I've
done. It took almost as long for me to read it as it took for you to go through it. So when did you start singing and performing? At what age?
Well, I started in high school. My older brother, who has since passed away, but he was in the choir, and he got me turned on to the singing in the choir first with a man named Bill Boone, who was my teacher in the chorus, and he got me involved in all-state and quad-state choir. We had a madrigal group. I even had a bluegrass band while I was in high school. So I started performing a lot with that, and then when I was in the 10th grade, when I was a sophomore in high school, our theater teacher, Juliet Guthrie, saw potential in me, and she cast me as probably the world's youngest Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. And I've never stopped working since then. So I mean, she's kept me busy. So I did.
Were you singing as a little boy, or did you not start singing at all until you were in high school?
Well, I mean, there was a spot on our farm in Tennessee where if you made a big noise, and I would do like the Tarzan yell, you get an echo back. So I always knew I could be loud. But as far as having any kind of talent for singing, that kind of came out later when I was in high school. I always liked to sing Christmas carols at Christmas. And, I'd sing along at church. But other than that, I really got into it in high school.
And at what point, as you were, singing, what point did you realize that, hey, you're pretty good at this and maybe good enough to pursue it as part of your dream?
Well, I think, again, that had to do with the encouragement from both Mr. Boone and Ms. Guthrie in high school. They saw potential in me, and they introduced me to all sorts of recordings. So I always, early on, before I had started singing, I was really into the spoken word. And so I'd listen to John Gielgud and Richard Burton recordings of Shakespeare, and just to hear the rhythm of the language. And that got me kind of into that headspace. and then once I started singing, she introduced me. I was introduced to Howard Keel and John Raitt and all those great singers, and I realized, well, I can do that too. So
they all had booming bass. They had booming bass baritones
exactly.
like you.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of great material to study from,
Mm-hmm.
and Robert Goulet particularly was an inspiration. So years later to work with him was a real treat.
Oh, I bet it was.
Like an idol of mine.
And so your early influences then were Howard Keel and so on. And
I used to before I had anything to put on my resume, I used to pompously say that I had a big powerful voice in the vein of Keel, Raitt, and McCrae, so people would know. So, I hope they didn't mind.
I'm going to guess, and it's only a guess, that when you walked in the door, no matter what you were doing, and once you opened your mouth and started singing, they didn't need any further explanation.
Well, I've been very lucky. I've been very blessed. In fact, that's the day that I got the day that I met Frank Wildhorn was my very first day at USC. I walked in. I'd come in from the Lost Colony, so I had long hair and a beard. And I'm signing in the very first day on the call board, and I heard them say that they had just cast Madeline Smith as the lead in this new show,
Mm-hmm.
and that they'd need somebody tall who could sing. So I stuck my head in, and I said, "Well, I'm tall. I can sing." And so we went on a little hike up to the music room, and I sat around a piano for about 3 hours with Frank, and he said, "Okay, boom." And so the day that I got there to USC in California, I was cast as the lead in the new main stage musical. So I've been very lucky. I didn't waste a lot of time.
Yeah, I was going to say, what took you so long? I mean, it took you half a day. And
know,
so,
right?
who were your acting heroes? Was it also Howard Keel and John Raitt?
Well, no, I grew up on Star Trek, so sometimes I'm Shatner-esque. I will take the unnecessarily long pause occasionally. But just the whole idea of it, I was inspired by a lot of the great actors on Star Trek, so that was a big influence of me.
That gave you a sense of dramatic acting, because that was very dramatic.
Yeah, exactly, and also Charlton Heston too. I got to see him on stage later on in Man for All Seasons,
Mm-hmm.
and Charlton Heston is not subtle. He's a really great actor, but it's just bordering on overacting, and I'd have to say that's kind of where my acting lives too.
I would say that occasionally you could find some of the scenery in his teeth.
Right, exactly.
He did like to chew the scenery a bit. So
He did,
so
but why not, right?
well, I guess if you can make a career out of it, why not is correct. That's certainly William Shatner made a career out of chewing scenery and all the rest of it. So why not is correct.
And Orson Welles too. Young Orson Welles was in. I thought he
Absolutely
was
true.
really great too.
Yeah, so here's the big compliment. You definitely have, in my lifetime, I've certainly heard lots of people sing. You have perhaps one of the most magnificent and powerful sets of pipes I've ever heard. I'm curious, what do you do to maintain your voice? Do you have to do anything special? Do you exercise? Do you have tricks, or what do you do?
Well, the more you sing, it's like any kind of muscle. When I'm singing a lot, then I'm really, really strong. And if I go for a long period of time, like between gigs where I haven't sung as much, then I have to be careful not to blow it out right away. So it's like anything else. The more you sing, the stronger you are. I don't drink alcohol. Alcohol is the voice killer. Because it's true, if you think about it, alcohol is an astringent. It's going to dry out your vocal cords, and they're going to be brittle, and then you're going to damage. And so I don't believe in, it's not any kind of religious prohibition. My dad had some problem with alcohol, which stopped me from, I don't have the attraction to it, because I've seen what it can do in a bad way.
Sure.
But I know that it hurts you vocally. And occasionally a glass of wine is okay, or some champagne on a celebratory thing. I will do that occasionally. But as far as when I'm singing, you just drink an awful lot of water and watch your diet and support. Try to get as much breath underneath as you can.
Do you exercise every day? Do you exercise your voice every day?
I try to. I like this because nobody wants to hear me singing around the house. The best place for me to sing is in the car. Because it's like a little singing studio.
Your
I
family.
try to sing as much as I can, and certainly if I'm gearing up to do a show, I have to sing.
Your family's had enough of your voice; they don't want to hear anymore.
That's pretty much true. But but I'm lucky. I did my show again here at the University of West Florida acoustically, which is exciting because most of the times you do a concert anymore, they've got you on either a handheld mic or a wireless mic, and everything's amplified, which is certainly one way to approach it. But there was something exciting about doing my concert acoustically in a concert hall, because it's the old school. I did an article once for when I was ringmaster called "Playing to the Back Wall," and that's, we were working with Blankenship and Bill White at USC, and all the people that I've worked with in these great theaters around the country have always taught me about playing to the back wall, playing, and in the old days, and certainly still in opera, you don't get that crutch of amplification, so you really have to give it, right?
Yes.
And so it's good training to do the concert acoustically.
And I know you've played in, what was it? Was it Anything Goes that you played at Heinz Hall here in Pittsburgh? It was the Anything Goes. Yeah, it was Anything Goes. And you played in that magnificent old building, and supposedly Tony Bennett, when he plays there, he purposely at some point turns off the mics and says you have to hear the way you have to hear the way this hall was built to be able to have sound, because it was built before there were microphones, and so it was built so that you could hear. And he then sings with no microphone, no amplification at all, and apparently you can hear him perfectly in the back row. Well,
of course you can, exactly. That there's some great old theaters around the country that are like that, and it's. But today, people are spoiled, and they don't. Not only that, their ears have been beaten down by this overly amplified music. So you almost have to. It's like getting your eyes adjusted to a dim room, right? You can't just go from full-on amplification to none without. You kind of got to get them ready for that.
Well, there's
because it takes audiences used to come prepared to listen, whereas in today's OCD world, people don't necessarily listen like they used to.
That's absolutely true. And there's a flip side to what you're saying too, that your particular training and your particular voice are booming and powerful, and there are lots of good singers who are not booming and powerful. They just have good voices, and so today they require.
Well, there's some light, delicate control that I wish I had. That's one of the things. Michael Crawford, when he was Phantom of the Opera, isn't the biggest, most powerful voice, but because he's got a pretty big sound when he wants it to be big. But when he goes to that micro control, that really small, delicate place that he goes, that's, nobody can do that like he can. Or like Colm Wilkinson, when he gets really small as Jean Valjean, makes it very hard for everybody else trying to sing that role, because what he does is very difficult.
So when you played Valjean, how did you try to get there, or did you not even try?
Oh, I went there. I got there fine. You have to go to a head voice to bring him home properly. And on a really nice night, I thought I did a really great job. Some days, the head voice for me is not as plastic to go from the big sound to the small sound. So on a good day, it was really beautiful. On a bad day, it's kind of like Walt Disney doing Mickey Mouse.
I'm having a hard time, Chuck, picturing you as Walt Disney doing Mickey Mouse.
Well, that's just the way it sounds to me sometimes. I think it was fine. It was fine, but Valjean, with the exception of Bring Him Home being delicate like that, and a couple of high notes here or there, is still is not. It's pretty much a baritone tenor role. Mm-hmm. It's there's definitely those high notes that make it very difficult, but most of the show is pretty. It sits where it should sit for a leading man, I think. It's got those. Bring Him Home makes it a challenge.
Did you enjoy playing Valjean?
Oh, I love it. It's because having played both Javert and Valjean, I know both sides of the barricade. And as a shameless plug, that's the name of my class, where I teach both sides of the barricade.
Oh.
It's so much energy to go on that arc. But by the time that she comes in, when Cosette comes in and wanting you not to die, and then ascending into heaven, basically with the gospel of the dead people coming in with you, there's nothing like it. It's the most emotional, really rewarding role I've ever played. So I love Les Mis. And to play Valjean. I mean, Javert is interesting because you got the whole suicide thing, and it goes to a real crazy place, almost like Jekyll and Hyde. But Valjean is the spiritual heart of that piece, and so to play that role is very rewarding.
Well, Valjean is the protagonist of the story, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And but Javert's the antagonist, so you need both sides of that to play it. Do you find that you you had to take your voice to different places to play those roles differently?
Yeah, because Javert has a tendency to want to be lower. So on the when you first meet the mayor, you wear a different chain, goes to that pedal place, which is again just outside of where I normally go. So I have to work my way down to get to the best of Javert, and I have to work my way up to get the best of Valjean. So you try to. Interesting enough, when I was working Valjean for like 6 months in training to get there, I would sing a lot of Michael Jackson.
Huh. And
that song, Earth Song.
Yeah.
I would do a lot of vocalizing on that song because it gave me a chance to do it soft, to do it loud, and it was just a lot of fun. So the best place to exercise for Jean Valjean is in a swimming pool in a hotel where it's nothing but reverb, and I can't tell you how many families I entertained on the Anything Goes tour while I was preparing for Valjean. And they're very accommodating to let me sing in the swimming pool.
Did they applaud?
They did. They did.
I would have paid money. I would have charged admission, Chuck.
That was good. It was a lot of fun, and there's not. To me, that's the best place to sing, because then you can build your, you're singing, and then you try to hold your breath for a minute or two under the water to build your lung capacity. So I'm a firm believer in hydrotherapy.
Then that is one of your exercises, is to swim and to hold your breath underwater.
Yes.
Okay, I think
dolphin work.
That's a really good tip. Did you say dolphin work?
Yeah, that's my dolphin work.
Do you come up out of the pool backwards and go like that?
If the fish is right.
So obviously you've played any number of roles, both already created by others or familiar with to audiences by others, and those that you've created whole cloth from nowhere. So, for instance, Rapunzel's Prince in Into the Woods, or Athos and Three Musketeers, and of course our friend Dr. Jekyll, you created from nothing. Well,
Athos was a revival of a 1927 classic, so I can't say I created that one, but certainly it had been long enough that since anybody had seen it. But yeah, it's very, very exciting to do new roles, because a lot of time they will custom tailor, what the requirements of the role vocally are on what you can give. And one of the things that I try to teach kids when they're auditioning is don't find something that you can nearly do to audition with. Find something that you can absolutely do, right? So it helps to be the person that the role is written for, because they don't write it outside of your dynamic range. Right?
Very, very good advice.
They can keep it challenging, but they find it within your wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
Where that's why Jean Valjean is a little harder for me, because it peaks just outside of my optimum zone. So I really have to work to get there. But conversely, people at auditions would always ask me, well, what's your range? And then I'd say, well, what do you need? Because there's ways we'll make it work, right?
Sure. So when you are given a new part that nobody has done, like Jekyll and Hyde or like Rapunzel's Prince, what is your preparation? What do you start to do? Do you do research? What do you do in order to prepare for that character?
Dramaturgy is a huge thing. We do. When, like, say, for Into the Woods, we studied all the fairy tales. We'd read some of the Bettelheim commentary on the stuff, but to try to find as many manifestations of it as you possibly can, just so you get a grounding of where it exists thematically. For Beauty and the Beast, the same thing. Try to find the backstory of the fairy tale and to find out what it means. And but a lot of it, it's like I don't know if you've ever seen that Ian McKellen explaining on The Office why he's such a good actor. I just pretend. Yeah, it's a great clip. And so there's a lot of it's just that too. You try to find the truth within yourself in those situations, and then you'll have, ideally, hopefully, you'll have great directors that allow you the freedom to experiment, and always reserve the right to be wrong. You can make a choice. Don't, make a bold choice. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But don't be afraid to make those choices.
You have to rely on the director being the first audience to tell you whether they think that you're not in the right place or not, correct?
Right, exactly. I mean, a good director will do that. A good director will give you to me, because I direct as well, and when I try to let the actor try to discover something without me telling him what to do. There are some directors who will say, you have to do it this way. But to me, the best directors are the ones that help you find it within yourself, because you're the one who has to make it happen anyway. And so, you need to find it among yourself. And then, for example, my Javert is a lot different than Terry Mann's Javert.
Of course.
It's a lot different than anybody else's Javert, because, again, you have to find what works for you. You have to bring the truth to you. So,
And yet you still have to come within the if you're on a tour, for instance, and it's a tour of a Broadway, it's the tour of the Broadway show, you have to come within the confines of the expectation that the audience believes is going to be there. You can't suddenly go, you can't turn it into
Absolutely.
Jerry Lewis,
No. But at the same time, though, they wouldn't have cast you if you weren't already 80% there just by being who you are.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your actual physical and mental preparation for any part. Do you, when you land a role, do you immediately start to memorize lines, or how do you go about it? How do you prep yourself?
Well, now it depends. If it's an existing show, something that already existed, a lot of times if you're doing like a regional show, you only have a couple of months to get ready, and sometimes you have a couple of weeks to get ready.
Mm-hmm.
So usually, if you only have a couple of weeks, then you have to just jump in. You have to dive in. And what I like to do is I put together my personal technique is to, because especially if you have a short period of time, is to first I'll take the script and I'll write it out longhand, because
Really?
The act of writing it down locks it into your brain.
You write the whole script out longhand?
Well, certainly all of my the scenes that I'm involved with. Scenes, it's like blah, 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 my part, blah, 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 my part. So if it's a scene that I'm in, I'll write down both the cues and my dialogue, just so I have it in my head mechanically, because that's my first step, is to put it there's a power in the writing is like drawing, and there's power in art, right?
Sure.
And so by writing it down, it makes it just locks it into your head better. It makes it easier to then memorize. And then what I'll do is I'll take my phone, or back before the phones would do this, I would take a tape recorder, and I would record the dialogue with both parts, both my part and then the cue lines. And then I'd go back, and then I'd do another recording of just the cues and leaving the open space for me to do the lines in between. So that, because while it's great if you have a scene partner, a lot of times you don't. And like I said, my family is busy with their own stuff, so they help me when they can.
Oh, and
certainly when my kids were younger, they helped me a lot.
It's just Dad doing his thing again.
Yeah, exactly. But like, say, I'm on a long drive or something like that, because again, it's a great place for singing, but it's also a great place for acting. And so I'd either do it on a long drive, or as I'm going to sleep, I'll just put on the recording and run the lines that way. Because 2 weeks is not very much time to learn a whole show.
No, it isn't.
But it happens more times than you think. And for those classic shows, it's good to know. And even if you know a show cold, you've done a show back in say it's been 10 years since you've done a show, you have to relearn it from scratch.
Sure.
It's not like it's going to still be there.
There will be
faded
memories.
I could do Jekyll and Hyde today if I needed to.
Well,
so
I hate to tell you, but you've been working on it for 37 years.
I know. It is a scary thing. I saw pictures you had posted about that production in the United Kingdom in that church.
Yes, at the Lincoln Cathedral in Lincolnshire, England.
That looks like a fun one.
That's a 900-plus-year-old church. The Lincoln Cathedral built starting in 1088, and they did the show in this magnificent edifice. And there are pictures you haven't seen yet that I have that eventually they'll release. They didn't want them released yet. That are mind-boggling, because
I saw him up on that table with his bare feet. I thought, well, that's got to be interesting. How did he get to that point?
Yep, that's right. and I thought it too. And so he had to come at it from a whole different perspective. By the way, the guy that played Jekyll and Hyde it's Ben Poole, who played it in Lincolnshire, England. He also directed the show. So
yeah, cool. That's a smart way to go. That's what I may have to do that myself, because I kept waiting. I thought surely there'd be a 25th anniversary something, but then they did right before that. They did the Constantine tour, which to me was interesting. I never actually got to see it, but I heard the recording.
I saw it several times. Yeah, I saw it several times.
And I think it was an interesting direction to go, but I don't think that it helped the idea of a 25th anniversary concert.
Well, somehow I guess it didn't. It certainly didn't catch fire on Broadway. So something wasn't quite there, and I'm not exactly sure I know exactly what it was. But I thought Constantine was very good.
Well, I understood that they went back to a video thing for the confrontation, right?
No, he still did the confrontation. It's just that they had a sort of a video kind of thing behind him. They did a lot of video in the show, but I thought he did a very good job, and I thought Deborah Cox was terrific. It's just
sure. No, I'm a fan. I'm a Constantine fan.
There was just something that didn't work with the production, and I'm not sure I can put a finger on it. But clearly it didn't work because it only ran 4 weeks on Broadway.
Well, I'm hoping. Hopefully, I'm waiting to find out. There's a production of Jekyll and Hyde that's some younger youth theater is doing. The director, I'm waiting to hear in the next day or two whether or not I still get to go up there. But it's somewhere up. It's near Pittsburgh.
Are you talking about McKeesport?
Maybe it is. I'm not sure. I have to look.
That's in 2 weeks.
But it's happening soon. I don't have my computer in front of me to check.
Well, we can chat. We can chat about that later.
He was saying that they're doing the confrontation, and they're doing it without the idea of the wig, which I think is a great idea. I'd like to, while I had a great time with the hair ballet,
mm-hmm.
I think it would have been interesting to do without the hair as well, because the hair it really was a stretch. It was a good theatrical device, but I don't know that it was completely necessary.
Well, that's the way that
it did create a different look from one to the other. But I've seen there's a couple of clips where when you magically so you want to see him, and then you do the injection in your leg, and then magically your hair is pulled back again, and oh, thank goodness! It's like I have a drug that will control the hair.
Now that you could make a lot of money with that drug.
That's true.
If you could control hair with a drug, that would be a good thing.
But still.
So all right, let's.
I still love that show, and frankly, I think I still got it in me. So I'd like to see something come of that one day too.
Well,
but I was kind of hoping that the 25th anniversary would do something. And as far as I know, maybe they did. I don't know. Did the Alley do anything?
I'm not aware of it. So I don't think so.
I kept waiting for the invitation.
I don't think so. I think that got passed on by. That show has had a magical life that is hard to describe. It took 17 years to get it to Broadway in the first place, and then it took off with the Jeckies and has had a very magic life since 1997, and it just keeps playing. They're about to do the first full Mandarin Chinese production of it.
Yeah, no, I saw those pictures. That's pretty amazing.
It
looks like, it looks very much like the traditional production too.
It does look like the traditional production. So I want to get us back onto Process instead of Jekyll and Hyde, which
sure.
we both know all too well. I'm curious about your life as an actor on Broadway. You spent many years on Broadway. What were when you were in a show on Broadway, what were your days like? Not your performances, but how did you manage your days?
Well, it was great because I lived. My very first show, it didn't run long, but I had an apartment in New York, and then for Into the Woods, when my son was just a year old, we had an apartment at the Symphony House, and so that was a whole different situation when you're actually living in the theater district, and at that point, Stuart's a baby, so we didn't have school to deal with, and so that was just delightful. Basically, we'd go for walks. We'd go to Central Park. We'd go to the zoo. We'd spend the whole day. Then, like 4 or 5 o'clock, I'd gear up to get ready, and then I would go and get ready for the show.
Mm-hmm.
And as the prince, the only thing that I had to do, complicated-wise, was because James Lapine wanted me to be a little more fairy tale than normal, and they tried a couple of wigs that they weren't happy with. So every day before the show, I had to go in, and they would curl my hair with a curling iron. Before the show, so that took longer than a normal process. But other than that, the makeup was really easy, and so that was not a problem. Then, say for example, for the 5 years that I was the Beast, at that point I was living in New Jersey, and my kids were at school. But so I would be home all day. I'd get up, I'd get the kids to breakfast, normal day, do my yard work around the house, help Susan with things around the house as well. And then about 4 o'clock, I'd hop on one of those decamp buses, and I would take that across the tunnel and into the city. And that would get me in about 5:30-ish. Maybe a little before that. Have a cup of coffee or something and sit down. And then I'd have to sit down. It took me 35, 40 minutes of in the chair time while they put the Beast on me. So it was, a lot of shows you have to do your own makeup, but when you're the Beast and Beauty and the Beast, they do it to you. And so that was very exciting.
You may recall.
So then you do the show.
You may recall that you had me sit in your makeup room before a performance, and I got to see them put that.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It was extremely cool to watch them put this very theatrical makeup on, and when it all comes together, it doesn't even look all that theatrical. It looks really real. So that was very cool.
Yeah, I loved that. So the challenge of that day is because I had to get back and do it again the next day. If I were to stay afterward, say people were in the house or something, and I would visit them, that means I would not make the 10:30 bus, which is fine. I didn't mind taking the next one. It's not till 11:30. But if I was very efficient and got right out and I could shoot back before the audience got backstage, I would take the 10:30 bus and I'd be home really quick. So that went on for like 5 years that way, and that was exciting.
How many performances? How many performances?
But as a rule, when you're doing a long-running show, you don't have to work so much on the show, right? It's not like when like you're talking about the process. Anytime when you're constantly working on new material, your days are filled preparing to do what you are about to do. Whereas when you're in a long-running show, you've done the show for several years, you don't have to rehearse the show.
Sure.
The doing of the show is the rehearsing, right?
Right.
And so that frees up the rest of your day for normal life.
And so you enjoyed that, I assume. You enjoyed having.
Oh my goodness, there's nothing like it. A long-running show is the best gift in the world to an actor, because for example, Les Mis, I was in for 2 years, and that's one of the ways we were able to buy our first they allow you to pretend to buy a house when you're making money steadily over a course of a year or two, and so we were able to get into our house in New Jersey with Les Mis. Beauty and the Beast did very well. Jekyll and Hyde, the post-Broadway tour, did very well for us financially, and that was an exciting time. So there's nothing like steady work, there just aren't that many long-running shows anymore. And the few that are still out touring, a lot of times they go out to non-union shows. So
how many actual performances did you do as the Beast on Broadway? Do you know?
It was over 1,200 performances.
1,200, and then you were in Toronto for a while?
Yeah, I was the premier Beast in Toronto. I was in the original company as standby to the Beast and Gaston for a year. And then I opened the show in Canada. I was the first Beast in Canada, and then I came back and did a few more years in New York. So I was the first Beast in Canada, and I was actually the third Beast in the States. It was me. I mean, it was Terry Mann, then Jeff McCarthy, and then me. And then Jim Barber came in after me, and now he's Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, that's quite a little club.
I know, right?
That's a magnificent club. So overall, between Toronto and New York, you probably did, what, more than 1,500 performances?
I know, a lot. I don't know, a lot.
Oh, that's a lot.
I did a lot.
What was your methodology or trick to not getting bored?
Oh, that's the easiest thing. And I used to say this back in the day when we were doing Les Mis, because when I came into the company of Les Mis, people had been doing it for practically a decade at that point. And some of the people who don't have big roles, it's easy for them to get tired and jaded, right?
Sure.
But the minute you start to be tired, you just got to realize there's 100 people in the line behind you wishing they could have your job. And you just got to remember how lucky you are to have this gig. And I always, usually you're doing a long-running show, and there's times that you can accrue and take a vacation if you want to. And I say, well, that's all well and good, but I know pretty soon, no matter how successful the show is, you're always going to get that big vacation at the end. So I'd rather wait, I don't like to leave a gig when it's happening, because it's too exciting. So I never get bored with it. And every show is a different show, even though it's the same show and you're going through the same routine. Every audience makes it fresh, and that's the key to acting is reacting. And if you get to where you're doing it mechanically by rote, the audience will see that too, and they won't enjoy it. But if you're actively in the moment, they can't help but be engaged too, because you're not just telling the story, you're living it for them, right?
Sure. Well, I think
so it never gets old because it's fresh in that moment.
You're
Does that make sense?
You're speaking to what would be better thought of as a work ethic, and sometimes people have those good ethics like you do, and sometimes people do not, and it does show.
Yeah, I just feel so grateful. It's all about gratitude too. What was that book, The Secret? Right? You read that book, The Secret, and it's all about being grateful. I said, well, that's not a secret.
That's a way to live life. That's the way you live it.
Exactly. Because you never know what's going to happen. You're going to have good times. You're going to have bad times. Just take them as they come. The fact that you have a time at all is a gift. Right?
So over the years, clearly you have been on more than your share of auditions. What is your audition prep? What do you do to prepare to go and improve yourself to someone?
Well, when I first started out, having done the Three Musketeers, I had I had two audition pieces. One was called My Sword. One was called My Bell. That was from the 1927 Rudolph Primo classic. I still do my audition clippets of them in my show just to tell the story. And the reason I would do that is because, I don't know, you've probably been on your share on the other side of the table for auditions. If I had a nickel for every time somebody sang This Is the Moment, or someone like you at auditions,
yes,
it's like, well, after a point, it's like, well, it's almost hard for me to get past the fact that I've heard that so many times. So I try to encourage my students to find something that's different in their wheelhouse that people haven't heard.
Sure.
Because if you can have an unusual song, that's going to make you more memorable than just singing the same old thing. But today, chances are good if you're auditioning for something, you're auditioning for something specific. So you really need to prepare the material that's specific to that role.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I've been, because I'm so far along in my career now that they're not going to bring me in unless they're serious about me considering me for something. So it's not quite the same as when I was young, where they just need an up tempo and a ballad, right?
Right.
And bring your book in. It's good to have those things, but at this point, it's all pretty well specifically. There are specific requests, so I have to prepare given material.
So that's a whole different. Your audition preparation, then you're saying it has actually changed in a marked way over the years, where you went and you could sing almost anything. Now you have to be a little bit more attuned and specific.
Right. Usually, yeah. More times than not, people will say, "This is what I want you to sing," as opposed to just come in and audition.
I see.
Right. But it's good to have both, and you need to have. I mean, it's good. I've got a book of things that I'm just prepared to sing because I'm old.
That's what being around the block more than once will do for you, Chuck.
Exactly.
But
again, it's like it's the more you have at your disposal, the more tools you have to demonstrate, the better off you'll be. So it's good to be able to sing. It's good to be able to dance if you can. It's good to have some stage combat skills. Those things are all good to have. But again, it all depends on what they need in that moment and whether you're what they're looking for. So you can't make it happen. And you can't be too depressed if you don't get something. God will give you the gifts that you need as you need them. And sometimes he's a little stingy. Sometimes he's like, okay, that barely got me just what I needed. Thanks a lot, but I could use a little cushion there, God. But the thing is, you can't. The minute that you start expecting something, you're always going to be disappointed. So the best thing to do is don't have expectations and be grateful for the gifts as they come.
That's a very good advice. Don't have expectations. Just go do the work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
an expectation is always it's like at Christmas. If you want a particular toy and you get 50 toys but you didn't get the one you wanted, you're going to be disappointed. Whereas if you just take it as it comes, you'll be just thrilled with all the toys you did get, right?
Yes, I agree.
So, yeah.
I totally agree. You and the gifts that have come your way are not just in the live, legitimate stage. You've also had a certain amount of a career in front of cameras, especially Automan and other shows. I know that you. Mm-hmm. What was your first job was on Dukes of Hazzard? Is that right?
Yeah, I was the guest villain on an episode of Dukes of Hazzard when the old Dukes came back. It was called Welcome Back, Bo and Luke, and I was running back. We were looking at that the other day. I was putting stuff together for the show and trying to find what we did have. And there's more things available now thanks to YouTube.
Sure.
That I never ever saw before, right?
Absolutely.
And I was looking at this chase on the circus train. It's the stupidest thing. The guy I played was not very smart. Like the Duke boys chased me to an abandoned circus train, so I think the best way to get away from them is to climb on top of the train and run away.
Yes.
So that's stupid. And so there's this one shot of me jumping off the circus train. You know, I should have used a stuntman, but I said, no, I got this. So I'm jumping from the top of a train onto the next flat car. And I'm saying, So I still framed it right there to where I'm halfway in the jump. And I said, that moment right there was probably the last time in my life my hips were 100%.
Really?
I didn't realize I'd hurt myself, but I think that was the first of the several. There was that, and then I don't know if you remember in Houston when they said, can I jump over that railing down to the stage? And I said, sure I can. Of course I can. And so I did that too, and I nearly broke the stage.
Oh. Well, and you've had screwed up hips ever since?
So I did a lot of crazy stunts like that, and over the years I think that eventually I wore down my hips, and eventually I now have new hips. They're much better. And
that has helped, I assume, with your confidence in just walking around and doing stuff.
Oh yeah. I was fortunate in that I didn't the damage that I caused. It didn't show up until it was like my fourth year as ringmaster of the circus, and then all of a sudden things were starting to catch, and I was like, wait, that's not good. So eventually I got that fixed and found out what had happened. But I got the same thing that Bo Jackson had, avascular necrosis, and it's just from me doing stupid stunts long enough that I did something to mess up the circulation in my in the blood flow to the top of my hips, and so now they're machine tooled.
So the lesson in there is that when you're on a movie, let the stuntman do the stunt work.
Let the stuntman do the stunt. Yeah, that's what the stuntmen are for. Although in the few scenes where you do see the stuntman, as opposed to me, you'd have to be blind not to realize that's not the same person at all. Who are you trying to fool with that?
Well, in Beauty and the Beast, you could have had a stuntman you wouldn't have really known, but other than the voice. And then the voice comes out and it's unmistakably you. You know?
Oh, true.
You know? So let's talk about the circus. You brought the circus up. Let's talk about that. That's, sure. That's a lot of people have had the dream.
There is no more circus.
There is no more circus.
Right?
There are those two schools of thought. There was the opposing thought with the animal rights advocates and so on. But now there's no circus, so that's not there. Unless you like Cirque du Soleil, that's a kind of circus, but it's not the same.
Cirque du Soleil is great, and there's still smaller circuses that still have animals.
Sure.
To me, if you think about the circus, back in the day, Circus Maximus, and then there was also the Hippodrome that used to be in New York. The whole thing about the circus was the animals. That's what made it a circus. That was part of it. The horse ring. Usually, the old Circus Maximus back in the ancient Roman days, was because of the horses riding in circles in front of the audience. That was a big part of the circus. So it's not uncommon to have animals as a part of the circus. And the fact that we live in such a sensitive, oversensitive world where they fight for things that are. I understand the heart behind the idea that people thought that animals ought not to be doing this kind of thing, but it's really no different than having a dog as a pet, or having a horse on the farm, or a mule, or things like that. These animals that were hired by the circus are the stars of the circus and were treated remarkably well. And for spending 4 years in the circus, I can promise you that all the stuff that while there are surely rogue players out in the world, Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey is not one of them. And those animals were treated better than anybody in the circus. If anything, there ought to be people complaining about the way the clowns were treated.
Nobody is ever going to complain about a clown mistreatment, Chuck. You know that.
Yeah, I guess not.
So
and they weren't really mistreated either. But everybody doted on those animals, and and I feel very lucky to have been able to work with the elephants. I got to ride.
I bet you do.
I got to ride Karen the elephant from the Midtown Tunnel down 34th Street, past the Empire State Building, all the way to Madison Square Garden.
Wow!
And it was one of the great experiences of my life. It was really fantastic.
She didn't try to throw you off either.
She did not, although it was the first time I'd actually been on the elephant, because I just assumed, yeah, I can do it, right? And I did. It was fine. But once she started walking and all that motion in the shoulders, I said, you could fall off of this thing pretty easy.
Yeah, I would think you could. And I think if she didn't want you on her, she'd get you off of her pretty fast.
Oh, Karen liked me by then. She liked me pretty good every day before the show. A piece of a Snickers bar. They let me feed her right before I'd go out and sing the national anthem, and then she would parade around with the girl and the flag.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day, before every show, she got a little candy from me.
Oh, well, that's good. So okay, lots of people have this. I mean, it's a famous dream of running away to the circus. Did you have that dream?
Oh, well, clearly I must have. I just was not aware of it. No, I was lucky. When the way I got the circus, I came to New York to audition to hopefully be the standby to Michael Crawford in The Woman in White.
Mm.
And so while I was in town, and I didn't get that, sadly, but it didn't run that long, so I couldn't feel too bad about it. But still, I thought it was an interesting show, plus the whole idea. The set was great. And it was nice to it's nice to be able to say that you at least got to be seen for things like that. And so while I was there, my agent called and said, there's an opportunity. They're looking for someone to be the ringmaster of the circus. And I said, okay, let me check. And it was the Feld family. And the Felds were, in fact, Irvin Feld more so than his son Kenneth, but they were all part of the producers of the Three Musketeers, my Broadway debut. So I said, oh yeah, couldn't hurt, right?
Sure.
So I went in and I auditioned. I felt I gave a good audition. And what they were looking for was the reason they were looking for actors instead of just a regular ringmaster was because they were going to come up with this kind of pseudo story about a fake family. And so there'd be a family planted in the audience where there was a father, a mother, a daughter, and a son. And he would live out his dream. The father would live out his dream of being the ringmaster. And so I thought I gave a real good audition. And then they called me back and they said that, that they would really they loved what I did, but they were afraid that the offer that they could make me would not be up to what I needed. And I said, well, why don't you make me the offer and we'll talk? Because by the time you've done something that lasts 11 months, even though maybe you're not making the salary you'd make for a shorter run, by the time you add it up to a whole year plus insurance, it's a pretty good deal.
Sure.
So I said, so we finally worked it out, and then they cast me. So I was, in fact, the fake father. And then the aerialist from Argentina, who played my wife, her dream was to become an aerialist in the circus, oddly enough. And then I had this dancer, Brazilian dancer daughter, whose dream was to become a dancer in the circus. And then, miraculously, my little Chinese acrobat son, his dream was to be an acrobat. Fortunately, there was a Chinese acrobat troupe that he fit right into. It was pretty amazing how that worked.
Your Chinese acrobat son, that's good.
That show it was called Circus of Dreams was the name of that circus. And we called it the Circus of Lies. Because it was all fake. We were all the fake family. And the only time it was really embarrassing was, because we sat up in the expensive seats at the end of the arena. And Jennifer Fuentes, who was a fantastic vocalist, was the circus songstress. And she would pick out the family who was going to live out their circus dreams. And one day, and usually there was lots of people to choose from, and so occasionally we'd have extra kids come on with us too, so I'd have to deal with that too. But so they would pick the family. Well, one day it was just me and my fake family. Nobody else sitting in the expensive seats except over to the right of me was Michael Douglas and his son. And the kid's raising his hand like, please, please, please. And I felt like saying, Michael, I hate to tell you, they're not going to pick you. It was so sad.
Oh, you could have shot Michael Douglas out of a cannon.
Oh, we could have. But it was nice. It was cool to see him. I got to meet some great people. I met Shatner. I met Billy Crystal. And my favorite one time backstage, Al Pacino came backstage too.
Oh wow! So
I've got a great picture with Al Pacino.
How different are circus people than theater people? Are they different?
Well, they're from different countries a lot. It's like the United Nations of entertainment, and say for example the Cossacks. Most of the horseback riders are from Russia. Most of the clowns, a lot of the clowns are from Hungary. We've got then you've got the acrobats from China. You've got the dancers from Brazil. They're cast from all over the country. So all over the world. So it's a chance to meet all these different cultures and stuff. But all in all, the same basic process. I also help put up the sets and take them down. It's a bigger scale than a normal theater touring show, but ultimately it's kind of the same thing. The difference is we got the horses and the animals, like the cats. The big cats, they would travel overland in trucks, but the elephants and the horses would travel with us on the train.
Mm-hmm. You had your own car?
And you lived 11 months of the year on the train with this group of people.
And you had...
So it's a whole different kind of reality.
You're literally living with them as opposed to Broadway where you're going home at night to your family.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
Did you
it's a sacrifice. It's like a tour of duty. It's like the way I look at it was like my tour of duty, only there's no guns. So I prefer it that way.
Did you have to share living quarters with people? Or did you have your own car?
No, I was lucky. As a ringmaster, I had like a whole quarter car to myself. I had my own sitting room, bedroom, bathroom. It was nice. It wasn't a whole car, but it was a whole quarter of a car.
And so you had at least a little privacy.
Yeah, it was nice. It was good.
But others had to share arrangements.
Huh?
Did other performers have to share arrangements?
Oh, definitely. Well, my son came and worked as a crewman for a while. Well, actually, they have their own cabins. Everybody has their own cabin, but sometimes they're very, very small. I'm not sure that I don't think anybody was double roomed that I was aware of. Maybe the acrobats, like the Chinese thing that was set up, because they had their own cooks, they had their own diet, they had a whole switch, so they may have been two to a cabin. But I know the clowns each had their own cabin. All the crew had their own cabin. But these cabins were like the size of a closet, some of them.
Interesting.
So it all depends. Mine was pretty cushy by comparison.
And because you were the ringmaster, you were the star of the show.
Well, I was a star of the show, certainly.
Because who else who did you, when you say you were a star of the show, aside from the animals, obviously they're stars, but who else would have been a star of the show?
You got the acts, you got the high wire acts, you got the acrobats, you got everybody's a star of the show in the circus. What I used to say when I was the ringmaster is that because he's kind of the bridge between the audience and the action, I used to think that I had the best seat in the house, that I was ritually just somebody who was at the circus as well. But I was kind of like the narrator too, so and they wrote special songs for me to sing, and that was so it was a lot. It was a real honor, and I was only the 35th ringmaster in the history of the circus.
Wow.
So
and
it's a pretty small club too.
And you obviously that was part of the job, was for you to sing throughout much of the performances. And
yeah.
Did you did this for 4 years again? Was it 4 years?
Yeah, 2 years I did Circus of Dreams, and then they wrote this show called Over the Top, specifically for me, so I had a lot more singing in the second show.
And did you love every minute of it, or were there times it was difficult being away from your family?
Well, no, it was difficult being away from my family, but it's a trade-off when you can still pay the mortgage, right? It's
sure.
It's like I'd rather have the steady job, and what was great about it, even though there's a lot of time I was away from my family. Paige got to come out and spend a few weeks with me out on the road. Stuart came; he worked for 6 months on the tour.
Oh, nice.
So he actually worked as help. He had to work hard, helping put the sets up and blah blah blah. He worked very hard as a crew member of the circus.
For the listeners, Stuart is your son.
And then Susan will come out. So we get you play these great cities, and then so the family comes to visit you when you're in the good cities.
Sure.
It's like a good tour of a musical. So. Sure, there's sacrifices that you make, but there's also advantages. So I'm a half full kind of guy.
I just wanted the audience to be aware that Stuart is your son, just so they know who that is.
Yeah, Stuart's my son. He's 30 years old now.
Oh my goodness, time flies by so fast. Good night. That's just amazing. You've worked as a journeyman actor, so to speak, for a very long time. How do you deal with the uncertainty of being between jobs?
You just try to stay as positive you can, and certainly that's kind of what I'm experiencing somewhat right this moment. And what I have done is I managed to. It's like the Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney thing. If a show's not happening, you got to make something happen. And so the first thing I did was contact the head of Disney Theatrical, Thomas Schumacher, and I said, I still have a lot I can give. Any ideas? And he put me in touch with a guy named Jeff Lee. Now, Jeff Lee, people know in the theater, he was the assistant director to Julie Taymor for The Lion King, and he was responsible for staging all the different million productions of Lion King that have been around the world since then. And one of the things that he does is coordinates the Disney Theatrical representatives for the cruise lines, for the Disney Cruise Line. He said to me, if I can write a show that they like and they can pitch, then they'll see what they can do. And so I did, and so that's when I created this show, Living the Dream. And Living the Dream basically tells my life story through the songs I've been blessed to sing. And the only caveat was for Disney, it had to be 50% Disney theatrical. And since Disney bought Into the Woods, that upped my percentage already.
Score. Big
right
time.
there.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I'm even in show business at all is when I was 10 years old. When I went to Disneyland in 1968, they just had done the very first facelift of Tomorrowland. The monorail was new. I was hooked on the power of Imagineering. That's why that's one of the reasons why I write out my scripts. And I also draw pictures of my characters, because there's power, there's magic in art. And the concept of Imagineering, if you can imagine it, then you can create it, is real. And that's something that I learned when I was 10 at Disney. So that starts the telling of my story in the show. And then we go through the Three Musketeers, we go through Into the Woods, we go through Camelot. I love singing If Ever I Would Leave You to the audience, because I used to go out and find a couple in the house to sing it to. And that's a highlight moment as well. I've got, Les Mis is in there. I usually end with, my next to the last, the final song before the encore is If I Can't Love Her from Beauty and the Beast. And then I always close with, and because I've directed this a few times since then, this is a role I'll be playing again, now that I'm getting old enough to play it. Cervantes in Man of La Mancha. I close with Impossible Dream to tie in the fact that it's all been a dream, and that I say at the end that this is a song that elegantly sums up all of our quest. So it brings us all together, because we're all of us are members of the great audience, right?
I think so.
Life is all about storytelling.
I would actually pay good money to see you play Don Quixote. I'm working on it.
I have a friend. Oh, you remember Ron? Do you remember Ron Manuel from
Sure.
USC?
Of course.
Well, he's teaching at Irvine Valley College in L.A. South of L.A. And we're going to do something. Whether it'll either be Camelot or Man of La Mancha, and I kind of would like it to be Man of La Mancha. Because it's great. It's one of the great shows ever, and it'll give me an excuse to build. Once I build myself the proper Don Quixote accoutrement, then I can do it anywhere I want to. Right?
That's absolutely true. Okay. Over your long and very rich career, have you bumped in the circus or on Broadway or somewhere else or on the road? Have you had any kind of experiences that were kind of odd rehearsal or odd performance experiences, something weird or quirky or funny that you might be able to share with us?
Well, one that you'll get a kick out of, at the, Jekyll and Hyde has got some moments anyway that are already pushed the level of suspended disbelief to a limit.
You think?
Right. And so there's the scene I was talking about earlier where, I jammed that syringe into my leg and magically my hair is fixed. And in that scene, there was one time when I go, because, it's this like laser syringe. And so Utterson comes in and he says, what'd you do with him? He said, oh, you want to see him? I'll show you. And then I usually smack my leg to get ready for the injection.
Yeah.
And then I jammed the syringe into my leg. Well, in this particular show, I smacked my leg, but I smacked it, but I didn't hit it as solidly as I thought, so it kind of brushed off. So the hand swung past my leg and knocked the syringe so violently that it went in a huge arc way off into the wings. And so it was so literally I just had to say, wait right there. I just kind of point my hand up to Utterson. I walked off the stage. I had to come back on and start over again. We got a huge laugh from the crowd. So that was a silly one.
Oh, that's hilarious. I was
lucky I didn't break the prop.
I had never heard that story before. You actually knocked the syringe off. Didn't you have an experience at the Alley Theater where the gun didn't go off? It was a gun then, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And the gun.
The thing at the Alley though that was most dangerous is, and in fact, if there's a recording, if you have a recording of it, you probably can hear this. During the being alive, I smacked the cane against my hand, kind of just as a thing, but the brass knob, I actually have this cane upstairs, but the brass knob flew off into the audience, boom. And if it had hit somebody, it would have killed them. Fortunately, it didn't. But you hear me say in the middle of the recording, you okay? So that was a silly moment.
That's the perfect thing for Hyde to say. You okay?
Yeah, it was crazy.
So
then in Beauty and the Beast in Canada, this happened about 3 months into the run. Carrie Butler was my Belle, and there's the wolf attack. And at this point, when the wolf attack first started, they tried to do it with puppets. There were wolf puppets on sticks and all, and they weren't very effective. In fact, one of the early preview reviews said that there ought to be a new category, best performance by a throw pillow. and so they rethought them, and eventually they became these Jellicle wolves, we call them, because they were like the cat's costume was only more wolf-like. And so for this wolf attack, the wolves, it was like a whole dance situation where they attack me, boom, boom, boom. They're swiping their claws all over me, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually I collapse in a heap. The wolves escape. They go away. And then Belle comes over, and she covers me with the blue cape and picks me up and takes me back to my chair. Well, this one particular time, I go down, same basic thing. I'm down on the ground. And all of a sudden I feel this blue cape. She's taking it, and she's covering it over my head. And she picks me up, and she takes me off stage. And there off stage is one of the wolves with the whole back of my hair. They'd taken the whole wig off when they got a little too close with the swiping. So I had to so that was a bit of a delay. But that was good. The wolf was sitting there going, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. What can you do? So.
I love stories like that because, it's live theater and things happen.
Yeah, you do what you can do, right?
So, yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking for an hour to my very good friend, Chuck Wagner, one of the, best voices, one of the best actors that I know in showbiz. And, what I'm wondering as we wind down the show here, Chuck, do you have maybe one solid piece of advice or a tip that you can lend to people that are trying to make their way in the business or trying to find courage or whatever it might be, some kind of good tip for our listeners?
Yeah, I think if you have the dream of being a performer, it's kind of like a calling, like the priesthood, and you'll know. If it's something that you need to do, you'll know that that's something that you want to pursue. But the main thing is you never know who's going to be influential in your life. So the best thing to do is to be nice to everybody. Be grateful to everybody. Don't snipe. Don't be a diva. And just, come prepared. Do your work. Be ready. Be open. Be grateful. But that's really it. Don't burn any bridges. And expose yourself to as much art as possible. There's some things that, like, for example, I know when Hamilton first came out, a lot of people said, I don't want to get into that. I don't like hip-hop, blah, blah, blah. Expose yourself to it because it's brilliant, right? So even if it's things that you don't necessarily, like, particularly I'm not the hugest fan of opera, and yet I try to make myself watch as much as I can because you never know what's going to hook you in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So always explore beyond your comfort zone and try to learn as much as you can.
Well, Chuck, that is just outstanding advice, and this has been a true treat for me to have you on the show today and to get into a little bit of depth with you about what it is that you've done and how you do it. I totally appreciate it, and I totally admire all that you've done, your great success you've had with your books and now this podcast. Well, thank you.
So I wish you all the success in the world, and thanks for thinking of me. And again, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Well, we very well can do that again. I would enjoy it very much. Thanks so much for being on the show.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Today's StoryBeat tip. Drama is frequently an interpretation of life, but it is not real life. The Corleones of The Godfather come alive as a real mafia family, even though they aren't real at all. Daniel Day-Lewis couldn't have seemed more lifelike as Abraham Lincoln in Lincoln, but as good as he is in that role, and he's incredibly good, it's still an act, a representation of Lincoln, not Lincoln himself. The moment you put words to paper and then ask actors, a director, designers, and technicians to stage or record those words and actions, the story becomes irretrievably removed from reality. Drama, at its best, is a heightened interpretation of life. By its very nature, drama cannot be more than a depiction of life. It is never life itself. Drama is always a contrivance. And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.